Well, Jen and I are traveling back from the ATA show from Indianapolis, and it's interesting down there. I had a couple people point out that antlers are dropping early this year, and I had a couple comments online that a given area antlers are dropping early, and why is this? Why is this year? Well, it's the same every year. I don't think there's really any difference from one location to the other. It's interesting. People say, well, they're dropping early this year. And we'll talk about some of the reasons that antlers drop early and what that could mean for your habitat and even where you're at. Because when antlers are dropping early, it's not necessarily a bad thing, but there's a culmination of several of these points that take place. And when they take place and when they're all together, then you get that perfect storm where antlers are going to drop early. And that could even mean some signs of poor health for the bucks. And I'll start out by we have two bucks right now. Jen, is it January 12th?
I think so.
But I think it's January 12th anyways. And we have two bucks that we know of, right? It'd be just two that have dropped early. And one we think is LO Beams that I wounded back in late October, early November. I hope he's still alive. It's his area. He's an older buck, 5-6 years old plus. That dropped the antlers, and he first dropped December 14th. Now that's an example of a buck that was wounded. And if he is that buck, it really highlights where he went to. He hasn't made it back up on top of the ridge where we see him a lot. He isn't back to his fall stomping grounds. He went right back to his summer grounds or winter grounds, and a place we don't see him at until sometime late summer. So if that's him, it makes sense. But again, he dropped December 14th. We had another buck that dropped by the end of December, and he was limping pretty severely on his right leg. And we saw him, his right front leg, we saw him doing that and limping pretty bad. And then all of a sudden, no antlers, still the same limping buck in the same locations. He seems to be getting around a little bit better now, so we're hoping that's the case. We had another buck that was limping, and his limp has gotten better over the last month, and he still has his antlers. So that's one thing. When you have bucks that are injured, you're going to find that they drop very fast. The average drop in our area is probably mid to late February. The timing of all this is really important because if you're shed hunting too early, you risk spooking out deer. And this time of year, they really herd up, and they herd up because there's a lack of winter cover. So when that winter cover and winter food is shrinking, then a lot of times those deer are gravitating to the few areas left, and when you add hunting pressure in or pressure of humans, there's not a lot of places for these deer to go, so then they herd up, they stockpile in locations that have favorable winter cover, favorable winter food, and a lack of pressure. So when you go in and you start shed hunting too early, they're gone. Now the one exception on public land, there's a lot of people shed hunting in certain areas on public land, so I'm getting out there early and often. I want to almost like beat the next person there to those spots. It's a little bit different on public land. I know a lot of people that seem to public land hunt January, February, March all over the place, and they're just constantly scouring and looking for that antler to drop. Now when it comes to northern environments where you get lots of snow, when I was in the UP of Michigan, the annual shed drop there was sometime around late December, early January. Those deer were migrating. They were forced to move into winter cover, and they didn't have a lot of locations that they could actually call winter home. And even when they got to the deer yards, it was just a green barn. There was not a lot of food. What's fortunate is the older does and older bucks, it was told to me that a fawn might be able to reach about 4 feet, 5 feet up, and then a mature doe or yearling buck more like 6 feet, and then a mature buck could probably reach up to nibble about 7 feet and get some boughs. So as you get higher and as the deer get older, there's more and more food, and that's why in locations like that, antlers will drop early, but at the same time, fawn survival is about 50%. These are very extreme areas. So in those locations, not only do they have the threat of winter severity where you have a lot of snow and a lot of cold, but they're forced into these low quality habitat locations that at least give them some thermal protection. Thank God for those locations, because if we didn't have those and they had to live out in the open hardwoods, they'd be in trouble. When you get into areas like where we hunt in northeast or northwest Pennsylvania, big hardwood areas, areas away from ag, you tend to see antlers dropping a little bit sooner because they don't have the hardwood regeneration, browse, and ultimate form of food that you do in ag areas. So ag areas in the upper Midwest, they'll drop a lot later. And when you get down into southern areas, it's more of a timing of this light change, and they're going to drop those antlers as it gets closer to that March time, April time frame. And so you see those patterns over and over and again. And that's why when you have a wounded deer and you add in poor quality habitat, you add in severity of winter, then in a lot of cases, not only are those bucks going to drop early, but they're probably not going to make it through the winter. It's all about survival. So always think about that when it comes to habitat, and it makes a lot of sense. I think some people get exposed to new areas, say northern wilderness areas, wooded areas, and they'll say, wow, you know, the bucks are dropping early this year. Maybe they're not used to the deer in that area, the bucks dropping early. What's interesting is you go to a place like southern or southeast Ohio, where you have big state land tracts, let's say the Shawnee State Forest. In there, those antlers can drop early, depending on where that buck's at, or they can drop a little bit later. In a location like that, they have greenbrier. They have a lot of clear cutting on the state land, a little bit different than the Wayne National Forest. That's a little bit bigger, where they don't do as much cutting as they would on state land. So in theory, you could have two public land tracts, giant tracts, near each other, but because one is cut more and one is cut less, then you'll see the antlers drop a little bit later in the areas that are cut more and a little bit earlier in the areas that cut less. So you can have an area like that where we've been out there muzzleloader hunting in early January and found sheds, and at the same time across the forest in an area that might be next to some ag land, some bait piles, some food plots, some clear cutting, those antlers might drop 2 months later. Again, what this all means for you is that, yes, they can drop early, but if you're an avid shed hunter and you're hunting private land, and you're hunting on private land, it really pays to get to know and understand the annual shed drop, which isn't going to vary much unless there's something very severe. If we had terrible blizzards the end of October, all of November, just historical snows, historical winds, and severe cold temperatures, and they come a month and a half early, then that could drastically affect shed timing. But when you're an avid shed hunter and you're hunting that private land, really pay attention to when those antlers are dropping overall. I like to say that I want to see 70-80% of those antlers drop before we actually head out to the woods to shed hunt. I want the woods to collect those. Now, if I have some random areas where I think this buck was in this corner, I'm not seeing any other bucks on camera, I think I can get in and out of there, and lo and behold, the camera tells me he dropped his antlers, then this is where really those cell cameras come into play, especially for that shed antler timing. So it can let you know in each area, maybe you have a specific buck you can go into and you're not going to spook other bucks that you're hoping to grab antlers from. But really, it's about timing. I hope this helps you understand. Yeah, antlers kind of drop based on the light in the sky, but that's kind of more starting the process. There's a lot of other factors that come in, including herd health, ultimate amount of winter cover, winter thermal protection, winter food sources, browse, injury, extreme temperatures, deep snows, and that can even vary because you can have an area in the UP of Michigan, northern Minnesota, upstate New York, where one year you have excessive snow and cold, the next year you don't, and that might affect shed timing a little bit, but not by a great deal. So learn the timing, learn when to head out, and I think that'll keep you on the path to finding more antlers this year and beyond. Thank you guys so much for watching the video. You're our best followers. You followed all the way to the end of the video. Really invite you to check out our website. We have our Earthway spreaders for sale, great Christmas presents. We're booking clients right now, all 5 of us. So by the end of December, it seems early, but by the end of December, our schedule will be booked for 2025. It's hard to believe. I'm already booked for December and most of January, February. We have our web classes, the Rut web class, how to design your whitetail property, and really important, hunting hills and thermals, understanding the wind. Those are great products on our site, all the books. Thank you so much for watching all the videos, buying the seed that you did this year. Really appreciate you.